Open the Topsham Planning Board. Please take the roll.
I will. Don Span.
Present.
Carrie Bickford. Present. Ronald Bisson.
Present.
Rand.
Present.
Dan Flagg.
Present.
Scott Libby.
Present.
And Joshua Spooner.
And put
is
him
absent.
excused.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess the first order of business before we get into the agenda is, has everyone had an opportunity to meet Hap? He's our new planning director for the town of Topsham.
No,
Hi.
Larry, okay.
Andy.
So Hap, do you want to say anything?
I'm Larry Grant.
Oh, it's,
Nice to meet you.
yeah, nice to meet you. It's great to be here in Topsham, and I look forward to having the opportunity to work with you folks and to work with other stakeholders and staff in the planning department to move the planning agenda forward and try to make a difference.
All right, great, thank you. So the approval of the minutes of the July 28th, 2022 meeting. I know you sent it out, then there was, that you updated it.
I did.
think with some comments of Scott's. A couple people weighed in. Do we have a motion on these minutes?
Move to accept the minutes of that meeting as they were amended on the second set.
Okay. Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed and one abstention. Okay, thank you. So the meeting's passed. All right, we have a public hearing. Building System LLC has submitted proposed 11 lots, single family subdivision at 715 Augusta Road, tax map R10, lot 79. And I guess you're gonna present it.
Yeah, Adrian, go ahead.
All right.
Please introduce yourself so you
Yep.
can get.
All right. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm Adrian Fine. I'm a civil engineer at Teradyne Consultants, and I'll be representing the Augusta Road subdivision tonight. The applicant's Building Systems LLC, Jeff Munn, represents them, and he is on as well for any questions. The project is at 715 Augusta Road. I'm going to try and share my screen, which I'll be able to show you. All right. Can you see this map?
We can.
Okay. So just to start to kind of orient where the project is, I know some of you have seen this before during the pre-application meeting, but zoomed way out, here's the town, and this is kind of on the northern end of the town, right along the Bowdoin town line up here. Zooming in onto Augusta Road, you can see that this parcel in its existing condition is a mix of fields, there's wetlands and streams down here and forested area in the rear of the parcel, as well as coming into the center. So for the existing conditions, we've got a single family home and a driveway here, and some buildings. Those will all be removed as part of this project. And the, let's see, the wetlands are about 2.7 acres, and the lawn and meadow and forested area makes up the rest. We've got just under 10 acres at 9.7 acres of field. The site slopes in a southeasterly direction towards these wetlands and streams, and there were no vernal pools found on the site. Mark Sensi did the wetlands, the vernal pools, and the test pits for septic for the proposed lots. We're not in a flood hazard zone, And as you can see here, the abutters, this is to the north, in Bowdoin, open field, we have forest, and then Weymouth Brook, I believe, Weymouth Brook over here, residential uses to the south and residential across the street. And there's electric overhead along Augusta Road. So now I'm going to switch over to our plan to go over our proposed. So this is the proposed project called Augusta Road subdivision. It's going to be an 11 lot, single family home subdivision. And the road is approximately 930 feet long, dead end road, which we've requested the dead end road waiver. As you could see from the aerial and that surrounding abutters, there's not really an opportunity to do anything but a dead end here because of the wetlands and the stream and undeveloped nature of the surrounding land. And the road will be called Halcyon. I don't know if Jeff wants to pronounce that at some point tonight correctly for me. But Halcyon Drive, and it will be offered as a public street. It's 20 feet wide with 2-foot shoulders. And the road name for that, as well as the road name for, we have a shared driveway coming into lot 6 and 7, which I'll go over in a minute, but we have the name for that as Wesley's Way. Jeff spoke with the town to get both of those approved from an E911 standpoint. So when you come into the site here, at the beginning of the road, we have a shared mailbox area with a turnout that's going to be 40 feet long. And we had some discussions about this at the staff review meeting and slid it back away from the road for plowing purposes, which was requested by some staff members. And then you come down the road here, and today there are some wetlands that go through a culvert that's underneath an old kind of farm road driveway. So we placed our road in that same location to minimize any impacts that we would have directly to the wetland with our road. And then we continue back along the road here, and then we do have another wetland crossing. This is a forested kind of narrow finger of wetlands, and we're proposing for this one a 36-inch culvert that will be buried 12 inches to make that natural bottom as required by Army Corps of Engineers. And then come to the dead end hammerhead here. And then the shared driveway is going to be accessed for lots 6 and 7. And we chose to do this because the buildable area for these lots is really back here. There's really nice field area back here for homes. And to get there, you have to cross the wetlands. So to reduce wetland impacts and reduce clearing too much of this forested area, which is a nice buffer between the rear of the lots and the road, we decided to do a shared driveway. And we had a lot of conversation with staff about this at our staff review meeting, which was very helpful. And we've come to a design that's acceptable to the fire chief. It's 20 feet wide, and we have a hammerhead that extends 50 feet in each direction with area within the easement beyond that for 20 feet to make sure there's no issues with turning. And then we're reducing the width just at the wetland crossing to 15 feet to minimize our impacts for our DEP permitting. And that was acceptable to the fire chief once we made sure the hammerhead was appropriate for their trucks. And we have some language right on the subdivision plan that states that the owners have to extend off of this. They can't use this area for parking. And back up to the beginning of the road, we do have a DOT entrance permit for this location. We sent that in to Kate after our initial submission, but that has been approved. And our site distance is plenty in each direction. We have 540 feet to the north and over 1,200 feet to the south. It is a 50-mile-per-hour road. So as far as the lots go, we have 11 lots. They're all at least 1.5 acres in size, which is also the calculation we used for density required here. They all have at least 150 feet of frontage, and lot 6 and 7 do gain frontage off of the road. So this Wesley's Way is, it's not a road, it's a shared driveway, but it's in an easement because the frontage will be off of the main road. The lots will be sold and built on by whoever buys them. So there will be no clearing on the lots as part of the road construction. And let's see, underground electric will be within the roadway, and there will be transformers, which we've shown on our plan. We also have individual septic systems and wells for each lot. And stormwater runoff is managed in a series of culverts and ditches. We also have this gray hatching here is a stormwater easement because we have a larger culvert crossing here with a level lip spreader to disperse stormwater flows. And we have been talking with the town review engineer about stormwater, and we've submitted our full stormwater report that's under review. We did receive some initial comments and make updates based on that. And the project will require a stormwater permit by rule, which will be reviewed as part of this process by the town engineer. And then as far as other permitting, we do have a DEP tier 1 for the wetland impacts that we will be submitting as well. And there will be a road association that's responsible for maintenance of this stormwater infrastructure, and as well as the road. And then the Wesley's Way shared driveway, there's also going to be a maintenance agreement between the lot 6 and lot 7 owners for maintenance of their shared driveway and plowing. And then as part of this project, one thing that came up during staff review was if we anticipated any blasting, because there is some ledge on the site. We do anticipate that there will be about 400, 700 yards generally in this area of blasting. And so we understand that requires planning board approval. So we wanted to start that conversation. And I spoke with Kate about this as well. I believe we're going to try and request approval for that through the same process. And I know we need to submit a form for our final meeting, but then the applicant will work with the code enforcement officer prior to any of that work being done and make sure all the appropriate abutter notifications get sent out. And then one other thing that I believe came up at the last meeting was just that the 75-foot stream setback not be part of any of the building envelopes and that setback be maintained. So we have shown that as a conservation buffer area in that 75 feet of the stream, and that's shown on all our plans and the subdivision plan that would go with all of the deeds. So with that, I'd welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you. I do have a few, but when do you want to start, or you want me to start? All right, you talked about a couple of waivers. The dead end waiver, does everyone remember the dead end road ordinance and exactly what that means? And do we need a refresher on that?
I can pull it up if we want.
You need a refresher?
I looked at it earlier.
Okay, all right.
Because I need to.
Right. Well, why don't we do it for the public record?
Yeah.
We have done waivers for the dead end, but it's been very rare. So while she's doing that, we'll come back to that. Talk again, because you talked about a waiver for dead end. You also talked somewhere in this documentation, and you mentioned it again, the 15-foot. I think it's on the dead end or the,
It's on the shared driveway.
it's on the shared driveway
15
end,
foot.
right?
Yes.
That gonna specifically need a waiver, or was that just, was the fire department okay with that?
Our understanding was that the fire department needed to be the one to approve that because it's not a road, but it needs to meet their access requirements. So typically they want 20 feet width for access to 2 homes. But we talked to them about that 15-foot section and we wrote a letter to the fire department and they responded saying that it was acceptable. That was attached to our comment response letter from, I believe it was August 4th.
Okay, so you wouldn't be looking for a waiver from us, but to the extent
No,
that-
I don't think that was a waiver. Yeah, that was just the fire department needed to approve it.
You already answered about the MDOT permit. I guess probably I'd like to understand that we're good as far as stormwater, but it sounds like that's with our peer review now.
Yes, so we submitted everything for our stormwater back in June, and then we received some comments in July and gave some updates to our report early August, and that's under review by the peer review engineer. He said prior to the final approval, he'll have that fully reviewed.
Okay, thanks. And then I guess I would ask the board to think about, we can come back to this. Staff has recommended that we take a site walk of this before we approve it. And then there was a statement in here from the staff that the applicant should indicate on final plans where existing vegetation will be preserved. These are areas should be flagged. We had some discussion recently that we may need to do that a little bit more formally as a condition of approval. And kind of, I'll say, spike out the areas that are not supposed to be removed, because we've seen it in Brunswick, seen it recently in a couple of projects that have been approved. So I'll just make a comment about that so that ends up in your thought process.
Yeah, I'd like to ask one question about that. So obviously we have our buffer area around the stream that would be undisturbed area, and then any of the wetlands that are not being permitted as a wetland disturbance would also be an area where there couldn't be clearing. As far as what Jeff is going to be constructing, he's constructing the road and the private way or the private drive. So, you know, his limit of clearing is basically the right of way and the easement surrounding this road. So I guess I just want clarity on what you need, what you're asking to be flagged. Is it like the area that's the stream? Because that's pretty windy, 75-foot setback from the stream, or something like the right of way?
I think what I would think, at least right now, is what would you be proposing as far as that vegetation that would be remain undisturbed? So we know what that is, right? And I don't want that to overtake this whole conversation, but just I more wanted you to be sensitive to that so that when we get to that, you can point out specifically what your plans are as far as this vegetation compared to, obviously the right of way, you're going to need to be able to get down in there to get the lots and set everything up. So, but I'm not sure I have a definitive answer yet because I don't know what I'm looking at quite yet. So,
Okay.
Scott?
I mean, just to follow up on that, I have an additional question. I mean, you usually will have for these last few, when we've had this question about what stays, it's been for a specific development that includes the building. In this case, obviously the stream buffer area has to remain where it is. Even if they sell the lots, when they get built, they'll be part of the building permit to retain the stream buffer for the new lots, correct? It's more of a question than a comment.
I would think so,
But yeah, I would think that you could not get a building permit that would violate the stream
Stream
buffer
buffer.
ordinance.
Right,
Yeah.
because that's beyond us. That's
And we-
that's
we're
the
not,
town.
we're not issuing a variance. or
Right.
anything, so.
Whereas the rest of the stream buffer and the wetlands would be really the only thing that we can control on
Probably,
this.
right, yes.
I don't think the other lovely patches of trees that probably the homeowners might want to keep as buffers between them, and their lots are really, they become the lot owners.
Anything
Or in
else?
other words, the other staff comment was about the streetlights, potential streetlights at the intersection of the new road and Augusta Road and on the Hammerhead. Are those things that you're addressing, or?
We are not proposing any new streetlights here. There's no streetlights in this vicinity, so it didn't fit kind of with the nature of the neighborhood or this type of rural development. And when we talked with staff, they said, okay, that's fine. We just wanted to make sure that if you do put any in there, they meet the new LED standards that the town is adopting. But we said that we weren't.
And then the only other thing about the buffers is the stormwater buffers, other than, obviously there's the stream buffers, but there's stormwater buffers, and you mentioned them. Those will be clearly defined and conveyed in the sale of the lots for the deeds, as far as.
Those have actually been removed. The town engineer requested that we put in a ditch instead of a buffer in the one location that we had that. So we removed the buffer, and we do have a few stormwater easements. Let me show this plan. It's a little easier to see it. So we have a stormwater easement here that's on lots 9 and 10. So that would be clearly defined. And then there's also a stormwater easement onto lot 2, and then onto lot 4 and 7. Those are for our culvert crossings. But the buffers themselves have been removed.
So the easements themselves will remain with the lots when they're sold.
Yes.
And then, thank you for bringing this one up. So the shared driveway kind of comes in just a few, 20 feet to the west of the Hammerhead. Is that how this? Have you guys thought at all about like a small cul-de-sac down there? It's going to be pretty strange with that driveway coming in at the Hammerhead. Then you get another driveway to the east going into that lot.
Yeah, so the
Hammerhead when you get.
the ground slopes off pretty substantially towards these wetlands. And so this is the way that we could minimize our clearing, grading, and wetland impacts. So this driveway, yes, it is close, but we do have a swale between them to make sure that both the Hammerhead and the driveway will drain appropriately. And we're able to not have any wetland impacts to this larger forested wetland here. If we were to do, a cul-de-sac or something like that, it gets into wetland impacts and causes some issues with frontage.
Well, it wouldn't get into the wetland impacts if it got moved back a little from the Hammerhead, but it's just a statement about The use of hammerheads has been something that comes before us a lot, and it seems like a small, and I don't know, maybe the fire chief doesn't like cul-de-sacs because the turn radius is, like, I'm not sure, but it seems like it's a better approach. The other question I had, you did mention, in the packet, it talks about this road becoming a town road at some point. But you mentioned that there's going to be a road association to take care of the road and stormwater. Is that just that's a temporary road association until you have the town take it over? Or have things changed?
It kind of depends on the timing of everything. You know, if the town either doesn't accept it or the timing of the acceptance is at a time when Jeff no longer owns all the lots, you know, someone needs to be responsible. So that's when that would come into play. I guess
So
Jeff.
the goal is still for the town eventually. Hopefully.
Yes.
And it sounded like from your responsive comments, it will be built to the town code accordingly.
Yes, the road section and dimensions are all per town code.
Thanks. Carrie?
Just curious, you mentioned these are just lots, so obviously you're gonna put it out for any builders that are gonna come along and build here. Is this stick built, or is there a potential for a mobile home to be put on one of these lots or anything else?
I'm gonna defer to Jeff to answer that question.
There will be stick-built conventional style homes. Take a rough guess, they'd be 2,500 to 3,000 square foot range. Nicer homes, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was getting at, was sort of the look and feel of this, you know, however many, 11 lot subdivision. Especially when you get into multiple builders. That's a concern that I would have as far as the end product, and kind of avoiding sort of a hodgepodge of homes that don't look like they belong together, maybe. Is that a way to put it? I don't know.
I understand. I've seen that many times, and also I review all plans before closing with a client, and so basically I have to sign off on their plans to make sure they're acceptable and they fit the neighborhood and so forth.
Dan?
Yeah, so kind of as a follow-up to Carrie's comments, will there be deeded covenants for these lots? Like minimum square footage and things of that nature?
Yeah, things of that nature. As far as deciding specifically on a minimal square footage, reality, I haven't gotten that far into it. I do know roughly the lots are going to be fairly expensive, so the price of the lots often dictate the size and the expense of the homes going on them. So.
And with the shared driveway being so close to the hammerhead, there's that kind of drainage swale between the two. This will probably be picked up in the peer review process, just making sure there's a clear, line of demarcation between, if it does become a town road at some point, what the town is responsible for versus what the shared driveway maintenance agreement is responsible for. And then lot 7, sorry.
I just wanted to mention that all the stormwater features that go along with the roads, that would include ditches, culverts, including the culvert that's in the shared driveway. Those are part of the quote unquote stormwater system. So they would go with the road, not with the lot owners. So that's why there's easements in those locations.
Okay, and then just looking at lot 7 and 6 here, with the setback line shown on here, for lot 7, it looks like the buildable area is fairly constricted. You got the leach field there. Just want to draw attention to, there are setback requirements, leach fields, the houses and so forth. It just looks like it's a tight lot to build on with the stream protection and so forth. So I just wanted to raise that potential issue as you move forward. Likewise on lot 10, is a forested wetland that kind of goes right through the middle of the buildable lot. And the leach field is shown kind of on one side. So again, it looks really tight there. Possibility the leach field could go into the front setback area possibly. But those are just things to be mindful of.
I can say on lot 10, so those wetlands are in the field and they are created because of some, farming activity, and there's a culvert in this location that kind of like restricted this land, that made it wet, and then it outlets to this really defined location. So all of those wetlands we're proposing to permit as fill as part of the project. They're not significant wetlands or significant habitat according to the wetland scientist. So that's all going to be part of our DEP permit. So those lot owners on lot 1 and 10 will be able to fill in that area to build a home here.
And my only other question, just looking at the plan quickly here, is daylight foundation drains. It looks like there's some decent slope on these lots. I just know that there's a lot of subdivisions in Topsham that have high groundwater and sump pumps, and people don't like them. So just something to be mindful of as you move forward. But it looks like, particularly the lots on the stream side, there's plenty of slope there. That's all I have.
Thanks, Dan. Larry, anything?
Can somebody refresh my memory regarding shared driveways? And that my memory is, like I said, 20 feet. And actually, following up on what you said, Don, do we actually need a waiver to drop that down to 15 going over the wetlands? Because I can't remember what's in the code. Quite
So
honestly.
I can pull it up if that's helpful, but we did go through this, and because it is a shared driveway and not a private way, it's able to be this size.
Drop
The
down.
size of it is basically up to the fire chief for access, if it's a shared driveway. And because it only serves 2 lots, it can be a shared driveway.
So it would never end up being
It can
a
never be a
public
road,
road.
no.
That was my next question. Is there any way that it could end up being requested to be a public way?
Well, it's not being built to town standards. So,
But that was my question. Is it being built to town standards?
It's being built to what the code requires in the driveway. So it could never be accepted as a public road. It's not a private way or a private road either. The reason that it has a separate name is because of the town's 911 standards,
Right.
because you won't be able to see the houses from the main road. So therefore the driveway needs another name for 911.
That's all I have for the moment.
Okay, Don?
On that shared driveway, if we go from 20 feet to 15 feet, are they gonna have like a wooden guardrail? Let's see, for the culvert side?
Can you answer that?
We do not have a guardrail where the culvert is here. We aren't having like substantial drop-offs here. And, where it is a driveway, the 15 feet is still pretty wide. Here, however, where we have the wetland crossing, we do have some pretty steep slopes off the side. And we do have a timber guardrail on either side. And that was something that we talked with the town engineer about. And that's going to be over this culvert wetland crossing.
I don't remember Home Place. I remember they had some guardrails there. I don't recall the drop off, do you?
You know, I just wondering here, because how big of a culvert they're gonna have in that section with a 15-foot road is?
It's a 36-inch culvert buried 12 inches, so it's essentially 24 inches above the existing ground surface. And then the road is above that, about 2 feet.
So I guess I'd want the peer review guy to tell us whether or not that would be required.
Yeah, 'cause you got 3-foot culvert
Right.
and 2 feet above it, it's
4 feet.
but
Very 12 inches, so that's why it's back to the 12.
Okay, you're asking the wrong guy. All right, okay.
Yeah, it's
any other
probably
questions?
3.5 to 4 feet above.
Any other questions before I open up for public comment? Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, the dead end road from our subdivision, chapter 191, 6B. The prohibition on dead end roads may be waived by the board under the following circumstances. Lot configuration or location does not provide for connection to an existing public road. Constraints on the subdivided parcel are such that no connections to existing public roads can be made. The road, should I share my screen so people can see this as well? Would that be helpful? Or,
You don't have to do it if you want. but
Okay.
I think everybody can hear it.
okay,
Yep, you're doing well.
all right. Thanks, Larry. The road is part of a phased project and subsequent approved phases would provide for connection to public roads. Existing natural features and resources are located in such a fashion to prevent connections to a public road, or valuable open spaces or natural resources can be preserved by eliminating a second entrance into the property. And when the board waives the dead end restriction, the following standards shall apply. In the R3 district, which is where this is, no dead end shall exceed 2,250 linear feet or 30 lots. So that's the main dead end waiver.
And what's the length of this road?
930 feet.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So less than that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Again, we've got this as a public hearing, so I'm going to open up the public hearing. That's right. Looks like you have some notes. Would you like to step up to the microphone? Please.
And my name is Dick Legacy. I live across from the places we talked about. 720 is my address. And it seems like I'll be impacted quite a bit by this project. My question is one to the board here. We're in a zone, what it is, but they told me I had to have 3 acres not to have any existing structure. This guy's getting away with 1.5 acres for each one. How does that happen?
What is the, it's 1.5 acres is for R3.
Yeah.
Right, 1.5 acres is the minimum lot size for this zone. I'm not sure where the 3 acres came from,
Okay,
but that's,
yeah, another lot would be 3 acres, if it's 1.5 acres. I have less than 3 acres. So I was concerned about that, so that's how he's getting away with 1.5 acres and 1.5 acres. It makes the three acres. The other concern is individual wells. How will that affect my well? As aquifers in that area.
I can't speak to that. I'm not sure they can either, but would you like to maybe try answering that question?
Are you asking me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I should speak during the public hearing, so.
Yeah, well, I think given that we're doing it in this format, this is probably the best way to try to do it. Right?
Yep. I am not a well driller or an environmental scientist who studies wells, but I do know that the wetland scientist who did test pits, he looked at these sites in terms of placement of wells and septic, didn't have concerns. The wells are also down gradient of the home in question. And there is, a substantial amount of wetlands and streams and brooks in the area. So we don't believe there's like a lack of water. I can't say for sure, but it doesn't seem that wells down gradient would be impacting a well on the other side of the road that's uphill.
Okay, thank you.
Just for comment, I have a negative outlook for this project. I moved to the country to be in the country. I didn't move to the country to be in the city. To me, that's adding a lot of structures in one place. So I take a negative outlook for this project. It's just for the record, my comment. It seems like it's going to be a lot more traffic in that area. Let's say 11 houses. It still seems that my driveway is exactly across from that driveway. So I've had issues with that neighbor in the past about plowing, snow removal and snow plowing. I had my mailbox on that side in my newspaper. And I solved the problem by getting it to move to my side, but so that solved that issue. Just to say it was an issue in the past, and I'm concerned about property value too. My property valuation, does that go down or up? Does anybody have any idea how that's impacted?
Even if, I could probably answer that, but I can't as the chairman of the planning board. I'm a realtor, but maybe you should talk to a realtor and ask them what they think. But I do have an opinion. But that's not something I can.
Well, my opinion is that it's not going to increase my property because of the amount of housing in that area. I've got like 5 or 6 down back of me. And then you get, it's about 20 some odd people living in that small area. So I'm not gonna live that long to really see the difference. At my age, I probably would never, see the impact once he sells all the lots and all the people get in there. That's a concern that I think people in the area should have. Like I say, I moved to the country to be in the country, not to be in the city, and that's quite a few neighbors. 11 neighbors there, plus the other neighbors around. That's 20 or 30 neighbors you get there in the country setting. Relish the thought of that. So that's just a few comments I had. Traffic and possibly crime could be an issue too. I don't know. I lived in close areas, and that's one of the reasons I moved to the country, because of crime in close areas. People, you don't know what crime is till you live in a crime infested area, which I have. They had to put bars on all the doors and windows. Bring in neighbors, you don't know what you're getting really. Anyway, that's just my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments or questions? Please.
Hi, Kurt Newfield, 14 Bear Beacon Drive. I've been debating whether to say this, but the last subdivision I did, relying on good faith and betting against Murphy's Law didn't work out, so I maybe I'm echoing something that's already been said, but on lot 9, the smaller building envelope, I'm sorry, that's 10 and 9 right up against the wetlands buffers. I guess I would just say consideration might be given to some sort of marking in the field when they set the property can, so the future homeowner / builder knows their constraints. Because when somebody goes into the buffering, it's just an unhappy experience for everybody. And lot 8, the building envelope includes the wetlands. I would suggest maybe it goes, excludes the wetlands, again, just so it's clear to the future homeowner, but can't get into.
Comments? Any other questions, concerns, or comments from the public? All right, I'll close the public hearing. Discussion from the board. All right, I guess
I just react to what Kurt said, and hopefully we can clarify that, especially on those lots that are roughly constrained. They're quite constrained.
so that's sort of back to one of my original comments, right? All right, so expectations from the board tonight. We have possible board findings, recommendations.
This is preliminary subdivision plan, so there will be another public hearing for the final plan. So if the board would like us to move forward, you can vote on it tonight. And second, on the preliminary, there will still be a second,
Another time.
another vote.
All right,
And you can set
Okay.
conditions. These are sort of standard from previous subdivisions, but you can add to them, of course.
And a sidewalk.
right, I was gonna ask that. What does the board think about a sidewalk?
I think it's would be prudent.
Did I close the public hearing?
Yeah.
All right, okay, what do you guys think?
I hate to agree with Dan, but I also think it's prudent.
Okay,
I have no problem agreeing with Dan most of the time.
all right,
So
so,
I
this
should
is
have said
not,
that too.
this is not a vote on Dan.
No.
I think it'd be good, especially to be able to see where on these lots that are relatively constrained. And
Yeah.
maybe have some of the kind of flagged, so how they will show up
Mhm.
in the final plans. Especially since I think we should add that as a 4th condition to our preliminary approval, to kick that up a notch.
what I'd put is a separate condition in regards to existing vegetation and so forth, which I think is in line with what you're talking about. That was my note I made earlier.
I think in particular, the 2 lots of the shared driveway, and some of those constraints surrounding that area would be helpful to mark out in the field. Take a look at it, like the building envelopes and so forth.
So I think the last time we did a site walk was on Lover's Lane. And I thought that worked out pretty well, having it before the meeting and then coming here for the meeting. I guess if it's acceptable to everyone here, when this project comes back, we'll do it a site walk and then come to have final. Does that work for everybody?
Not
Should we do that before they progress their plan? In case there's any discussion or comments that contribute to the
We could.
final.
What would you
Yeah.
prefer? Again, I think I'm.
Adrian?
Adrian?
Adrian, yes.
Yeah. I guess it depends a little. So you're asking for certain things to be flagged in the field. I know you said 6, 7, and maybe lots 9 and 10. I don't know, exactly what you want flagged, but Jeff, how quickly, we could get a survey out there to flag that, do a site walk sooner if you think that would be more helpful.
When are you expecting to bring this back, I guess?
as soon as possible.
Probably ought to try to do the site walk before the same night as the final plan. Just in case there is something that we say, oh, we need some adjustments here.
Right. We could do it on the 25th. You have appropriate time to, because it is public, so we have to publicize it.
10 days before, so yes.
I will most likely not be here.
Right, well, that's the problem I have with 25th. I
Okay.
won't, he
Yeah,
won't,
and me.
she won't, we're
Okay.
already down 3. We could
Yeah.
try it. We could give, let's see if Josh can make the sidewalk, but you're still missing 3 board members for the sidewalk.
I guess I would kick it back to the applicant. Do they think they would be, so they certainly wouldn't be ready for the next meeting? Would they be ready for the following meeting, which would be 4 weeks from today? Okay,
The 8th is
September
next,
8th, yeah.
September 8th is our,
so that, I don't know if that timeline would be appropriate.
So you said the planning board meeting for final would be September 8th, and when are you saying the site walk would be?
that's not what he was saying, but, so, all right, so you think you could have it ready for final at least by the 8th, right? And I guess
Yes.
I'm back to my original thought, not to try to force anything on anybody, but we'd probably do a site walk on the 8th
Yep.
and then come here for final.
Yeah, unless the board has strong feelings about things that they anticipate having comments on that are gonna seriously change the project, then we would obviously want to know sooner, but if it's, you know, more for informative purposes and some things that could be discussed as conditions, then that's totally acceptable for us to do it the same day.
I think we talked about it. The question becomes whether or not you understood what these guys were saying or what the public said. I don't know, Kurt, maybe I could ask you to send an email to staff with at least your comments in regards to what you would suggest flagged, and then you guys can consider that at least probably what we would be expecting. Is that okay with you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I think my expectation is that the areas that are flagged are the areas that are going to be
Left alone.
left alone in your final plan, so that we can visually see where they are and get a better handle on, you know, what these lots look like with those. And, you know, we're seeing it in person, not just on the final plans itself. Both those buffers and also the shared driveway area, I think.
Yeah, okay.
So I think what we're talking would be a site walk on the 8th. And that would be before the planning board meeting, and then we reconvene here for the planning board meeting at 6:30. And she would get both of those posted in the newspaper. Yeah, 5:30 sidewalk.
Okay.
5:30 p.m. you said?
Okay, so that being said, I think, is there any further discussion? If not, maybe motion on the preliminary plan?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
I had just one comment.
Okay,
When they come back for the thing, we have the plans for the, like that, right there. So, look at the thing.
Hard copies, you mean?
you like hard copies? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then I would like to know when we're out there walking where the 15-foot is, and you know, what the peer reviewers' comments are regarding whether or not it should have the. Okay, good. All right, I'm sure
Are you,
you're invited
are
as
you-
well. That'll be a public walk at the site at 5:30. on the September 8th.
It's a Thursday.
Yes,
Are you going to be just making any votes or motions on the dead end waiver tonight?
I guess I hadn't planned on it. I guess, I don't know, typically we don't, but
Doesn't the waiver have to be filed with the final approval?
yeah, we would do the waiver before we did final, right?
Okay,
We do that all in the same meeting, but,
Like, I don't think you've heard any huge outcry
right, that's what
in
I
our
was,
discussion, so I think that's what you take with you.
okay, thank you.
But I'd like to
Kind of
call
seems to meet the requirements.
Even better.
no.
That's.
All right, I'm sorry. So is there anything else before we take a motion on preliminary? Adrian?
I think I've had all my questions answered. Jeff, did you have anything else?
No, maybe just a pronunciation of the road name, which is Halcyon. Halcyon is known as, the definition would be tranquil, peaceful, private.
As in halcyon days.
Yes.
Well, I know Halcyon has Halcyon, and I'm not sure it's the same spelling, but Halcyon Yarns.
That
So
too.
I move.
Yep.
I move that the application for preliminary plan approval submitted by Building Systems LLC for tax map R10, lot 79 be approved in accordance with 191.3 and 191.5 of the Topsham Code with the following conditions. The applicant shall revise the submitted plan set to be to provide for the necessary sheets for the final plan approval. The applicant shall respond to any technical comments identified by the town's review engineer. The applicant shall respond to and resolve all staff comments. And the applicant should clearly indicate on final plans where existing vegetation will be preserved and stream buffers retained. These areas should be flagged for the sidewalk on the 8th.
You have a second?
I'll second it.
You understood the conditions?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm trying to, I'm looking at Adrian, who's in the middle of that stack over there.
Yes, I understood the conditions. We will
Okay.
show on the plans the areas that the vegetation that can't be removed, and we'll flag them in the field for the site walk.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Any discussion on that? All right, hearing none, all in favor? All right. So it's unanimous for preliminary plan approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All of that.
I make
Okay.
a motion to adjourn to workshop.
Please. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? All right. Planning board is adjourned to workshop on the recode. So anyone, are we gonna keep this streaming or not?
Yes, because Kirk is joining us on Zoom, and we also have a few people from the CPIC committee who have joined us on Zoom as well. So, yeah, I am
Thank you, sir.
coming. So, yeah, Don, I'm just gonna turn it over to Kirk, if that's okay with you.
Sure. So Kirk, you're on Zoom. You're gonna lead this?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me all right?
Now I can see you. Right.
See and hear me?
I'm gonna quit talking so I can watch you instead of myself.
Well, I don't have much of a visual presentation or show for you, but good evening, everyone. It's good to see you again. I'm happy to be able to join you tonight to talk a little bit more about a pretty important project that I know you're all aware of. We've had an opportunity over the past few weeks and months to begin to put together some provisions for the new, what will be a new proposed zoning ordinance. You'll all remember, and you've been involved in probably several conversations related to an area that was I'm going to share my screen with you here. Did I successfully share it, or am I?
You
I'm
may
not
need
sure
to
I'm
zoom in
sharing
a
it.
bit, Kurt, 'cause it's looking a little small.
Are you, is
Yes.
that helping at all?
Yes, thank you.
Is that all right? Okay, good. Yeah, as I was saying, you all have been involved. We have been talking a good deal, or you all have, over the past bit of time about some of the new zoning concepts and new zones that are meant to really kind of drill down and help implement the Topsham's comprehensive plan. We call that the Topsham Center area. I hope that that's language that makes sense to you. It was identified in the request for proposals that we responded to as a consulting team as an area where the town was envisioning a kind of new approach to zoning that focuses more on physical form, encouraging mixed use and more kind of walkable town scale urban development patterns. And we've talked a fair amount about that. And we've gotten some good feedback, both from the planning board and certainly from CPIC and staff, as we've kind of worked through some issues and tried to kind of right size that approach. And that effort is continuing. We'll be we'll be prepared to share with you some new concepts for that Topsham Center area as we move forward over the next weeks and months. But in addition to that specific focus on the Topsham Center area, as we began this project, the town staff and CPIC were very interested in addressing some other aspects of the town's existing zoning ordinance, trying to kind of clean up, reorganize, kind of modernize the approach to presenting information, and of course, make sure that these new zoning concepts for Topsham Center can be kind of seamlessly integrated into the overall zoning and land development, probably more broadly, the land development regulation scheme that the town has. And so tonight I want to talk to you a bit about our approach to working on those other chapters or articles of the zoning ordinance and the site plan review ordinance that the town now has. Hopefully you received in your packet a handout that includes links to some, I want to stress, preliminary working drafts of new articles of the zoning ordinance. And if you'll take the opportunity in the future of clicking on these links that exist within this document, and if there's an easier way for us to share this with you, I'm happy to do that. I thought this might be a good approach, but and if you'll click on those links, you'll be able to sort of download chapters or articles rather of the zoning ordinance and share comments and thoughts that you have about provisions if you're so inclined. And in future meetings, we're hopeful that we can engage you in a discussion of, and really drill down and focus more specifically on your reaction to what we're proposing as part of the new zoning ordinance, and eventually the site plan review chapter of the town code as well. So the articles that we have shared thus far include the kind of opening, introductory, kind of legal boilerplate provisions, the overall purposes of the ordinance, the statutory authorization and just some kind of general rules, not information that's consulted on a regular basis in a zoning ordinance, but an important kind of legal and introductory framework. Not real exciting material, but we've included it in this initial installment of articles for your review. And again, we'll look forward to talking about those more in depth as after you've had an opportunity to examine them a little more thoroughly. We've also shared a preliminary drafts of the commercial and industrial zones. The residential zones, what we're calling the special purpose zones, an article devoted to allowed uses and use regulations for the various zones in the updated zoning ordinance in the recode document. Accessory uses and structures, an article on parking and mobility, a start of an article on the various zoning related procedures that are part of a zoning ordinance, ranging from how one gets a rezoning to how a zoning variance is granted or a conditional use, those sorts of matters. A short article on just general administration and enforcement, and finally an article on nonconformities. Again, these are preliminary drafts. I wasn't expecting that you all would have had an opportunity to review these at all, or certainly in depth for tonight meetings. But if you have had an opportunity, I welcome the opportunity to discuss and answer questions. But I thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about how we're approaching the preparation of this new material. I would call it updated material. I want to stress that we start this effort while the Topsham Center area is kind of going to be created from whole cloth, kind of brand new, in order to advance the vision of the comprehensive plan. The remaining articles of the zoning ordinance and the site plan review ordinance are essentially updates, adjustments, and deletions and modernization of existing regulations. So of course we start the effort by taking the existing zoning and site plan review regulations, analyzing those and deciding, one of the things we heard in early project meeting is there's some amount of redundancy, duplication between the zoning chapter of the town code and the site plan review chapter, and some provisions that are a bit outdated in terms of compliance with, Maine law, the state statutes. And so one of the things that we started doing at the very beginning of the process is we put together a table of contents, and we began to kind of go through the ordinance with town staff at that time and decide which provisions of the ordinance are working fairly well, just kind of need to be fit into the new ordinance framework, which really weren't serving the town well or didn't really serve much of a purpose, and which ones needed to be carried over pretty much in whole cloth. And so I'm just kind of sharing with you this kind of working table of contents where we're identifying for our own purposes which aspects are being retained, which are being carried over, and which are going to be retained but adjusted a fair amount. And you can see that list here. I don't expect you to absorb it,
Make it
but
bigger.
I just kind of wanted to go ahead.
Can you make it even bigger?
Bigger.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
She said she sent it out.
So this is, go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, can I share this with the rest of planning board and the public? Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think rather than trying to absorb it tonight, I think it is I think it would be useful context. another document that I'll share with you, Kate, and I don't think I did. I think I shared this one, but not this one. This is a table or an analysis of the two chapters 175, site plan review, and zoning, kind of side by side, where we're trying to identify, are there provisions in both ordinance that are purporting to address the same issue? And if so, do we need both? Or can we move the applicable regulations into one chapter or another? I see that we have some questions, Kate. I don't know. I'm not,
I
of course, I'm
I
not
raised
running
my
this
hand
meeting.
quickly to ask if you're sharing content, if you could zoom in, because otherwise it's or it can't be read.
Even on a computer.
Thank you.
I guess I'm not sharing this for the purposes of absorption. I'm just kind of walking you through the process. And as Kate indicated, we'll share hard copies of this material. This is a table that, as I said, is kind of a side-by-side comparison of similar provisions. In the left-hand column is the site plan review chapter, the right-hand column, the zoning chapter, where very similar information or generally similar information is sometimes, not always, presented in two parts of the town code. And in some cases that may make sense. In other cases, there may be an opportunity to kind of simplify and decide we need to move these sorts of regulations into one ordinance or another, so we don't have potentially conflicting or at least redundant information in a couple of different places. We think that'll be easier from an administrative standpoint, as well as for the public to kind of follow along and applicants for development.
Can Don interrupt you with a question for a minute? Go ahead.
So I guess two things. One is, but right now what you're talking about is comparing the two. I guess I have to ask the question, is there a way to consolidate so we only have one to deal with? Because, and maybe someone can tell me if that's just not allowed, right? But that's the bottom line is, we do have 175 and we do have 225 and we have subdivision and we have different things that we're allowed to do and not allowed to do depending on where we're at in regards to waivers and other things. So that's just a question which I don't certainly have the answer for, right? But I have to presuppose that it was never consolidated because you can't, right? But that would be a question. Secondly, I gotta go back all the way to the beginning, and we had that whole Main Street group that put together, and we came up with different zones on Main Street, Lower Village and Middle Village, Upper Village, and Village Center, all that stuff, right? Is that what you're calling town center or not? Like, I couldn't quite figure out what you were showing on that chart. So town center is essentially the Main Street, or what was considered the Main Street plan.
It's also MUC1. It's
Commercial.
a commercial area.
All right, okay.
Yeah,
That,
yeah, it's all goes starts with Lower Village.
And all the way up to schools.
When the project began, this was the map for the Topsham
okay.
Center zones
I
area.
was trying to, because I couldn't see it, right? But okay. So you have this section here basically is Main Street, right? But you have picked up Topsham Fair Mall, the Crooker lot, and then you have gone out and picked up what is now a commercial center and so forth. So that's good. All right, thanks.
So is the, I can't see from this angle, but is that big double line through there? Is that 295? Doesn't see? Okay, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure.
I will say that although this was the starting point for the Topsham Center area, as we're working through the zones for that area, we are likely going to be proposing some adjustments to the map in which the Topsham Center zones would apply. Just full disclosure. And I don't remember, Kate, if is it generally west of 295 where we're thinking, and maybe reducing the northern reach of that area? Is that generally what we're talking about?
Yes, we'd be taking off the west of 295 zones as well as reducing a lot of the current light industrial zone from being a part of the Topsham Center zones, districts, whatever they become.
So you're not gonna you're gonna eliminate looking at MUC one?
That was the thought by CPIC for a couple different reasons, but we can talk about that more now or another time.
Well,
Partly because there's no public water and sewer over there, and there's less of a defined kind of understanding of what will go over there. So that would become kind of an area that could be a master plan development rather than us zoning it now.
Yeah, I
Does that
get
make
that.
sense? Okay.
But just my own personal comment, and everybody here has heard this before. We did a moratorium on MEC one, right? Before it was MEC one. We developed all this zoning and called it a master plan. And nothing has happened there since we did that. And that was what, 15, 20 years ago, right? Maybe that's overstating the number of years, but
Pretty close.
nothing has happened, right? I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong or whatever, but the question is, whatever is over there doesn't seem to be working for any kind of development as far as Topsham. And you're right, west of the interstate, there is no infrastructure. But I guess I'd like somewhere along the line for someone to start to look at what can be done with the zoning on MEC one, right? And Kurt, you've heard me say that several times, so. No,
There's gonna be a movie theater over there.
I think that's different than what the
no,
town
I know,
center
and that's,
is focused on,
I get
focusing
that,
on
right.
the form base.
Yeah.
And we're really talking about more of a overall development plan for that zone.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they're moving over. But since we've interrupted you, Kurt, maybe we'll just keep going with these questions. If that's okay. And to bring it back to the recode part, I like those two tables and I'm interested in seeing them because I did take a look at the new articles, but I started with Article 1 and you lost me just because it's probably not the place to start. And the reason you lost me is because I couldn't translate what I was seeing in Article 1 to what I'm used to seeing in any of the other code I've been working on for however many years I've been on this board. But those other two tables are perfect for trying to
tell us what
provide
you're
and
trying to do,
introduce,
right?
introduce where, what's being kept, what's being removed, what is questionable. I think that's what the green, yellow, and red mean. And then the comparison of 175 to 225 is great for where things are consolidating. I'm hoping you might be showing a third table that's like a crosswalk. I'm used to crosswalks in my business, but I don't know if that translates here, but something that has the first column being your new articles for 175 and 225, and the other column being, these are the sections from the old code that we are incorporating here. We're pulling from 225-25, and now it's in Article 5, or we're pulling from 175-4, and it's in 175-3. Just not that I want to dot I's and cross T's, but I kind of want to know what that is important. What is that is in our current code that we feel is important? Where is it now, and how it's being incorporated in this new document without having to search it ourselves? I don't know if that's easily done, but it seems like you're kind of on the way to doing that with those first two tables.
That one document that has the two could have the crosswalk in the center.
Crosswalk in there would be great. But
A flow chart type idea. As far as
I think
where it goes, this is here, now it's down here.
Yeah, I think
that's an engineer talking.
But
The flow chart, I think, will get very confusing. I just want, I need a table. just like
actually,
letters
it's
and
not that
numbers.
confusing, but I think the table adding another column, and maybe I'm defining the crosswalk wrong.
Yeah.
You basically have 175 on one side, 225, and then the new in the center.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
And then you can still have your arrows as far as flow if you want, but
Right. I think we just want to be able to follow what staff and Kurt are doing to progress this in terms of the mapping of the information.
The one that you had the red, green and yellow on. Yes, once I was able to start reading it, that does look like it's handy as well.
Those are very reasonable requests. We will certainly, as we move forward, we'll work on a table that very clearly indicates where information from the existing ordinances are finding a landing pad in the new ordinance, that sort of crosswalk document that you're referring to. That is a doable request, at least at a section or at least at some level within the overall ordinance outline. I know that it's perhaps a little disorienting to have a potential new ordinance presented to you that doesn't look like one of those legislative markup, red line, underline, strike through drafts. But the nature of the reorganization and reformat of this overall effort is making that nearly impossible. Or if we tried to do it, it would be nearly illegible. So what we're trying to do in the articles that we're presenting is including, sometimes we'll do the red line and strike through to indicate it that a specific regulation is proposed to change, that we're changing the setback from 20 foot to 15 feet or the lot area from X to Y. In other cases, we're just including a general footnote that explains why we've done something or how, or if the material is entirely new. And just to avoid a document that's, again, got so many marks and annotations in it that's nearly impossible to decipher.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And I want to stress that although we've suggested tonight that maybe some of the areas shown in this original project area are being pulled back a bit in terms of inclusion in the new mixed use zones, what we've sometimes referred to as the form-based zones, it doesn't mean they won't be addressed in the project or can't be updated or revised as part of the other zoning ordinance and site plan ordinance update work that we're doing. So please don't necessarily assume that no changes would be proposed to, for example, MUC1, or that no changes couldn't be proposed as part of our upcoming discussions. I think that's all on the table. It's just that the approach we're using for the Topsham Center zones doesn't, as we've worked through it, doesn't seem to have as clear of applicability and fit the context quite so much within these areas that we're pulling back on a little bit. And to answer to Mr. Chairman, to answer your initial question, we began this project, and I'll say it this way: we began this project thinking we should try and integrate site plan review into the overall zoning ordinance. We think that makes perfect sense at one level. The problem that we've run into, or the challenge that we've run into, and this is all very much in play, by the way, is that it appears to us that the planning board has far more authority for flexibility and sort of common sense decision-making, waivers and the like through the site plan review ordinance than they do if we integrate that material into the zoning ordinance, where the opportunities for relief from various standards and guidelines tends to go more to the Board of Appeals.
Yeah, no, I understand. And actually, that's why I said it the way I did, because there's an opportunity to at least do something that makes sense sometimes, that sometimes our hands are tied, and it depends on what side of the ordinance we're working with, right? So I guess if I could get the whole ordinance with the more flexibility, that would be my goal, right?
I have seen, as part of our early reconnaissance work on this project, I have collected ordinances from throughout Maine, trying to focus on, towns similar in context. And there are examples of zoning ordinances that integrate site plan review procedures into the overall zoning framework and try and make clear by specific references which standards are eligible for modification by the planning board versus which ones require a full-on zoning variance. It just seemed to us initially that that might get a little clumsy, but again,
That's fine.
none of these decisions, we're far from locking anything in stone now. You'll notice on this working outline, and I'll blow it up one more time for our viewers at home. We're now considering actually going the opposite direction and moving more of the kind of more site planning related design standards for parking lot, those kinds of information, landscaping and outdoor lighting and parking seems to be areas where there's a whole lot of crossover between zoning and site plan review. And we're actually now contemplating moving, you can see in this, we've indicated where we're thinking that it may make sense to move what we've typically thought of as zoning provisions over to the site plan chapters for the reasons I described. But we can talk about that.
Can we change more of that to that light green?
I think there's definitely a possibility.
Zoning, Don.
I'm not saying that, I'm just saying reasonable.
But that gets to the redundancy that has always been an issue with us.
Right.
Are those things that you highlighted right there that are in both, where as Dawn said, our hands are tied at some point, but we have freedom in other areas, and it doesn't really make sense where we have that freedom or where we don't. And by trying to pull some of those things, like these more technical aspects that you mentioned, Kirk, into 175, it may help the process for all of us.
We remain hopeful that that's true, and with your help, I think we can get there. And we'll look forward, as I say, to diving in and seeing what we can figure out. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Let's see here if I have other. Yeah, I've just here are the articles that have been shared. You'll notice that, as I indicated, there are some annotation. I know it's too small. Where we've shown changes with the more traditional. We've included footnotes, and these are topics that we'll want to discuss with you going forward. So any other questions about how we're approaching it, why we've started where we started in this outline, or anything I can answer? I know another thing we wanted to talk to you about, or at least mention, is an overall schedule for starting to go through this material and where that puts us in terms of a timeline to get to the finish line for this project. But before we do that, answer any questions you have.
Carrie has some questions then. Does anybody in the audience want to say anything? All right, so Carrie, why don't you go, and then.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was gonna add, and I've mentioned this before when, it's been almost a year since I became a member of this board.
Hey, season.
Taking in a lot of things, but as we go down the road and we open up all of these articles, any photographs would be greatly appreciated. Yes, pictures tell a lot and really help to kind of get the overall understanding.
Yeah, and I guess we don't need it for tonight, but maybe if we could have packets that they're gonna go through, so we can
Examples.
actually all be flipping through it.
Yep. Examples in a photographic form would be great. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the
last week or so, Kate and I have had a number of internal discussions, which we haven't had an opportunity to share with the consultant yet.
Does everyone know who you are?
I'm
Here?
Pat Stelling, the planning director.
Welcome.
Thank you. So to pick up on Terry's point, I guess it's been my experience that graphic representation within a zoning code or a comp plan is a much easier way for everyone to understand what the intent of the document is. So as we carry on our discussions with the consultant, we're going to be encouraging them to portray elements of the new code as much as possible in a graphic form. Secondly, there are elements of subdivision within the existing code, but my understanding is that the scope of work for this project doesn't include a review of the subdivision code. And, you know, it would be my recommendation to the board and to the people that I report to that we extend the scope of work to include a review of the subdivision code to ensure that it's, you know, fully incorporated in the new zoning code. And so we'll have to have some further discussions with the consultant about that, and also with Derek and Mark and others. The third thing is we'd like to get a better handle on the form and the shape of the form-based code, just for administrative purposes. We have a small department, a small planning staff, and for ease of administrative purposes, and recognizing that Topsham isn't, you know, a fully urbanized area, that we think it would be helpful to get more clarity on what the form and the scope of the form-based code might look like, so that it'll be easier to deploy.
What we should do, why don't each of you tell him who you are, right?
We've met.
You've met, okay, good. So you, all right, we're good there. All right. Thank you. Kurt.
So for your information, so I'm Kurt Neufeld. I had been with a local consulting firm, Bull Sightlines, for a long time now, working with another one. I'm an engineer who's done a lot of projects in the Topsham area for quite a while. Now, hopefully I have more free time than I can be involved in these sorts of discussions. I know I haven't been involved in a lot of them, but something that has come to my attention as an engineer, as chair of TDI, is really a much greater interest in multifamily development. In the area, there's a lot of it going up, and Topsham ordinances are really restrictive in that regard. I know that there was a change recently for the MUC, and being sensitive to the scope of this, a lot of R1 is served by water and sewer. Some of it's within that, the village center zone, and with a lot of the zoning requirement minimums are 15,000 square feet per dwelling unit. That's basically 2 per acre. And that's not multifamily, that's a duplex on a good day. So in order to really, I think, allow for, if not encourage, the opportunities for infill housing in the area, certainly within the scope of this study and also within just the zoning recode, take a look at the densities allowed for multifamily, particularly concerned by the utilities, even if it's just water. Get it down right 5,000 square feet per unit. That would be 8 per acre. If you had a 1 acre building with a lot with an 8-unit apartment on there, by the time you take care of some landscaping setbacks and parking, I guarantee you might be lucky to get those 8 unless you build an 8-story tower. But really missing some opportunities, and I do hope to participate more with this group. Still having a big mouth, but I really think that's just something I want to get out of the table.
So Kurt, and just, I guess, full disclosure, I testified against the moratorium in Brunswick. And I'm on the new committee, which hasn't met yet, to evaluate what's going on there. But that being said, does density, I'll just say residential density in Topsham, is that really part of the recode, or is that something that maybe Topsham should be looking at separately?
And that's fine, if it's not appropriate. in this
Well,
form,
no, I'm not saying
but
that. I'm just saying
saying that,
recode may take a lot longer than maybe Topsham can look at.
Isn't it part of the form base though? I mean, some of the forms that were presented to us early on were
The
for
Topsham side,
larger
yes.
residential.
That would get rid of.
I'm not trying to decouple anything. I'm just asking the questions. One is a longer project. This may be a little bit more urgent. Is there a way to deal with that?
My understanding of form-based code is that it looks at the whole density issue very differently than the current code. So it actually allows for more density within certain parameters. So there isn't a limit on units, you know, in the same way that it is now. I'm not articulate enough about it to say more than that.
I understand that. And I was just, the only reason I brought it up the way I did is I'm wondering if there's a couple tracks, right? Because I think density needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. I'm not saying recode doesn't, but if recode is on a little bit slower train, maybe density can be on the fast train, or maybe recode can have a fast train for density. But I do think there is an urgent need in the state for, I don't mean to start preaching, so I'll stop, but I think everybody understands what I'm trying to say.
I would suggest that we go to Kirk for a second, because he brought up the issue of schedule and time frame, and we've had certain ideas in terms of what we'd like to accomplish by the 2023 annual meeting, town meeting. And since Kirk brings this up, and you're hearing the concern about multifamily, greater density, my understanding is it is somewhat automatically addressed in the center of town in that code revision. Do you have any comments, Kirk, in terms of how we should be looking at this particular matter?
Kirk, can we go to you instead of the chart?
I don't know.
Stop sharing your screen.
There we go.
Susan is correct. For the Topsham Center area, that general map that I showed you before with some revisions, the approach to zoning within that area will be far different when it comes to density and minimum lot size. It focuses more on the physical form of new buildings, and in terms of how they're sited on the lot, how tall they are, how long they are, whether they, have doors and windows that sort of activate the public realm, the sidewalk area in the street. And in doing so, by dialing in calibrating those features more, we find that we can move away from minimum lot area requirements, maximum density requirements, and simply let the building code, in combination with the overall building envelope that's created through the form-based provisions, to control the overall density, providing much more flexibility for housing developers to be imaginative and fit more units on a lot. Certainly other things will need to occur in terms of compliance with the site development and site planning standards, but that approach to zoning opens up a whole different frontier in terms of density, but doing so in a way that preserves the overall physical scale of the town, both in terms of compatibility with existing areas and desired appearance and scale of newly developing areas.
So not to bring,
So-
if I could.
Sure.
And I don't even know what the number, is it LD 1303 or whatever it
That's
is?
what I was gonna bring up, Don,
All right,
LD 2003.
All right, well,
Yeah.
I'm not, I got one of the numbers, right?
Got the
yes,
three
please.
right.
Yeah, this is something that I think Kirk and I briefly talked about, but there is a new Maine state law, LD 2003, that increases density by right, basically in all areas serviced by public water and sewer, including allowing 2 ADUs on a property, 1 attached, 1 detached, as well as allowing multifamily density. I don't know all the specifics off the top of my head, but
Can you
This goes
get
into
him a
effect.
copy of it?
yes, we've talked about it already. But this goes into effect next year. We will have to update our code to be compliant with it anyway. And it might be something worth talking about if it sounds like, Kurt from TDI, Don, if there are people who are interested in talking about how this law will impact Topsham, that might be like an additional kind of little group conversation that could be had, because I think that is a point that could be something that we update kind of separately from recode, because we have to do it anyway to comply with the new state law.
So, yeah, and that's the reason I brought it up.
I think the state law will supersede anything we have
Exactly.
in
Right.
the code, no matter what we do.
And it just, and
Yeah.
without getting into housing too far,
Yeah.
I don't know, the former or the current Speaker of the House had a task force, and coming out of that task force on housing, they developed this new state law that they rolled out, which is something that I think every single town in the state's gonna have to deal with, right? But to the extent that it does seem to deal with density, which we're talking about, and it's something that we're gonna have to eventually deal with anyway, maybe we can get that incorporated into what we're trying to do here, right? So.
So you said that it takes effect in 2023. Do we know?
I don't remember. I know that,
I don't know the
So that's
effective
something
date.
for us to look into.
yeah, I just know that the Brunswick planner, when we were interviewing you, had it in his paperwork, and after we're done with interviews, he said, and we're all gonna have to deal with this.
It's beginning April 20th, 2023, requires municipalities to allow the construction of accessory dwelling units and sets out specific requirements for permitting the construction of accessory dwelling units, et cetera. There's a lot more to it, but
So yeah, let's talk your idea on schedule, and if we can somehow get, I think, density. I'm only one voice here. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but
I don't mean to hijack the conversation.
No.
No.
I know you're not.
It's become pressing, and I just wanted, I figured this was a forum, just to say, hey, this is on the way up.
I think it'd be great if we could have a sort of, not just part of CPIC, but kind of a side discussion on how we want to talk about it, because it's something that Tom Lister and I have been saying, oh, we have to deal with that soon.
Yeah, well, it's right around the corner.
Yeah.
Right, so, okay.
Couple snowstorms away.
All right, so we should keep moving. You wanted to talk about schedule?
Yeah, I mean, Kurt really brought that up. And when we're talking
Yeah,
about.
just generally. Go ahead, Susan.
No, I think that that's something that's on all of our minds.
Yeah.
And became a heavier thought when we start talking about adding an additional track. So I think it would be helpful to hear what you have in mind, Kurt, because we've been working on this for a while. And we have some goals in mind, and we know that, human activity has its own life.
Right. Well, we have always been working towards that town meeting that occurs in first quarter, second quarter of next year. But at the same time, we've been balancing that overall objective with the knowledge that we're going to need to do a good job of engaging the public. And, first of all, the planning boards and commissions, the CPIC and others, and the general public as we move forward in order to build support, or at least understanding we don't know that we're going to be proposing anything that'll need widespread support, but we need to make sure that folks are well aware of the proposed changes and that there's, that we've addressed any concerns. So it is, I would say we would like the opportunity, now that we've got a new planning director on board, to work on a schedule to share with you by the time of your next meeting that kind of sets out what we think is a realistic schedule. It is possible that that schedule is going to deviate from the original timeline. I'll just share that with you. It's going to be challenging for us to meet that deadline. That doesn't mean that we couldn't package some needed immediate amendments in time for town meeting, if indeed it's the case that we don't think we're going to be able to meet the overall deadline, as you suggested, Don, sort of maybe having a dual track of some priority amendments that just need to be done prior to the overall recode effort. So I'm not prepared to share a specific timeline tonight. We will work with staff over the next week or two to prepare and CPEC and prepare a timeline, and be able to share that with you at your next meeting.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, could I just respond to the questions that Susan has raised, that Kirk has responded to? It's been my experience in the adoption of zoning codes elsewhere that it's really important to have informal consultation with stakeholder groups in advance of getting to the public meeting, because you want to flush as many of the toxins in the draft out before you get to the public meeting. Because if you don't do it that way, it may blow up at the public meeting because people haven't had an opportunity to voice any concerns they may have or any issues with the draft in the form in which it's presented. So we really need to sort of sit down and take a look at who the stakeholder groups are that need to be consulted and what format is best to do that in with them, and to develop a schedule that enables us, along with the consultant, to engage those stakeholder groups to see how they react to the penultimate draft. So that, as Kirk said, may affect the timing of when this thing gets to the finish line.
Sounds good to me.
I think the thing you run into at any town meeting is going to be, I've been driving a Ford for 30 years. Why do I need to now switch to a Chevy?
Yeah. And that's why you want to have those conversations in advance, insofar as that's possible.
Yeah.
We heard some of that tonight, anyway.
Yeah.
In the previous. Okay. Did anyone else hear it?
Yeah,
Please.
So Rick Schultz, a member of CPIC for me. So just very back to basics here. The comments on those articles that you put the links to, do you have any preference on how you want that feedback when people are reviewing those, as far as just editorial comments in that original document, compiled list of some sort? And I'm thinking along the lines of we'll schedule it, just overlap stuff fall through the cracks. Do you have a preference both on timing and method of delivering those comments and feedback?
Scott?
I second Kirk.
Oh,
Well, yeah, it's,
I found
oh, were you talking to Kirk?
Yeah.
kind of
Oh, sorry.
talking to Kirk, but then also just.
You were looking and
It's a general.
I want to move out of the line of fire.
He was up there.
But I'm interested too, because I commented on the recode, the
Oh,
the form-based part.
You
And
could
it's hard to
comment.
figure out which way to do it.
Yeah.
Whether a comment or an edit or whatever is most helpful to you, Kirk, that makes it easy and speeds things along would be great.
The documents are shared in a format that will allow everyone to sort of participate in a community conversation about it. In other words, when one person offers some comments, the next person who opens the document will see those comments and that can serve as fodder for additional thoughts or their own thoughts. So if you would use the online, if you'll open the documents from those links and use the comment feature, it should make itself apparent. Then we'll kind of have a community conversation in the document itself. That I think that would be, it's useful for us, and I think it would be useful for you as reviewers as well to see what your friends, neighbors, and colleagues have offered up as thoughts. In terms of timing, I think that will probably we'll be in a better position to answer that as we share an overall timeline, which has some suggested cutoffs for commenting on one or two articles, and then we move on to some others. So we'll be in a position to share that with you very soon.
Thoughts?
Bullet points,
What's that?
bullet points.
Yeah, I don't want to pick on that, but I'll give you an example of me personally, right? We have some IT people doing some great work for us, right? And they have everything shared, right? In fact, I see the emails that just keep coming, right? But I don't have time to go look at all of them, right? And then when I do go, it's then asking me for some password to get into it or whatever. So I just send a text to my office manager and say, can you just print out the last 7 pages or whatever it was that they wanted me to look at so I can look at it, right? Sure. And so I'm not picking on you at all. It's the world we're in today. But if there's a way to, I hate to say it this way, to feed us spoon-sized pieces of this stuff, you know, carries of bullets, something that we can just focus on and not have to find a way in to do, that would help me immensely. But that's just me. I don't know about the rest of the group.
Well, you may find that some of the comments are the same. And if they're the same by multiple different people,
Yeah.
then summarize it, put it into one bullet point.
So, but I don't know if because you're going, obviously reviewing sections at a time, I think, right? So if you're reviewing sections or if you're reviewing concepts or whatever, if you can package that and send it and she can get it to us, right? It's probably the easiest way for most of us to do it.
You know, I hate.
Does that make sense?
Well, I hate to say this as well, but you know, this is another thing I've experienced with some of these online, is that you're the first one in, those are the only comments you see. You may not go back there again until later on when there's a series of comments afterwards. So, you know, essentially some kind of cutoff time and summarizing a comment log would be, you know, saying, you know, we want to leave articles 2, 3, 5, 9 open until the next planning board workshop. All comments, you know, the week before the workshop, so a comment log can be compiled, you know, something along those lines. Because I found myself even in the past where, you know, I'll look at the document when it first comes out, maybe a week later, and then by the time the meeting comes, there's 15 more comments that it's like, oh, well, that's because I haven't been in the document since I.
The most helpful thing I get at planning board is these guys and their staff review comments, right? Where they basically summarize everything in a letter or memo that comes to us that kind of talks about the whole application, right? And then I can go down through stuff. Sometimes I have to print it out. Sometimes I look at it online, but the bottom line is I at least know to go look where I need to go look, right? And that summary that they do is the most helpful thing I think I get.
And I think the tables that we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
including the crosswalking thing, will be a very helpful way for those of us, especially not so familiar with, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
And once they get it, sorry, to sort of look at at least an ideal schedule, like to complete all of this by X, and we'd like to do these sections by Y, you know, to sort of, whether we can or not is another issue, but let's lay out something that's, you know.
And so again, back to the town meeting, these guys know we have to, it has to go through the select board back off of the town meeting for when they put things on the warrant, right?
Yep.
And they have public hearings for that, right? And then we have public hearings before that, right? So that whole process,
Yep.
you know, second quarter or April, that's not very far away, right? So, so yeah, the schedule needs to line up with what's possible, I think, to try to get for that first meeting, and
Yeah.
maybe it's not the whole, right? But
so we've always looked at the recode along with the form base.
Yeah.
And it's quite possible the recode would be a lower lift than the form base. And that, you know, maybe the recode is ready for town meeting in 23, but form base is not. That could be a scenario. I don't think town meeting 2023 has to be a firm deadline to do all of this, because it's a big lift here for the form base, and just knowing people in Topsham, there's gotta be a lot of communication, because people don't
no,
understand this stuff.
back to Hal's comments. I think
Absolutely.
the informal stakeholder meetings is a really good idea.
But I think also, following up with Dan, it goes beyond just the stakeholders, so-called,
Well, yeah, I agree.
because it's always the populace of the town meeting that, you know, can jump things up or do something entirely different.
It took us 3 town meetings to get the electronic signs passed.
But quite a few ordinance changes were made at this town meeting, so, you know,
Right.
with some good discussion,
Yeah.
and they went right
I
through.
agree.
My
Constitution
experience
shows that.
for what it's worth is that zoning codes are more difficult to adopt than comp plans. And the reason for that is people's property rights. And so if we're proposing something that's going to affect, like the gentleman who was here earlier tonight, you know, his interpretation of what he can do with his property, you can be pretty sure that he's going to show up and let you know what he thinks about it.
Mhm.
So we want to make sure, as I, mentioned earlier, that we do as much informal consultation in advance so that people who have issues with various elements of the recode process have an opportunity to be heard, and that we can massage the planning code draft insofar as possible to reflect their concerns before we go to the formal public hearing at the public meeting.
All right. Sir, do you have anything else?
No, sir, not tonight.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Anyone
Yeah,
here?
thank
have
you all.
anything new? Okay, all right. I think we'll adjourn for the second time tonight. All right.
Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you.
We look forward to talking to